Alright, as you can see, we've got the engine all painted up. Came out pretty nice. Now's your time to double check your drain plug. Make sure that's on there tight and fastened tightly. And also your engine gasket kit. And also your engine gasket kit will include a new oil pan plug seal. So be sure to put that on, and you'll be sure to have a nice drip proof plug on here. So we're going to tighten this on. We don't have to wonder about that. That's a done deal. So now we're going to turn this engine over and we're going to build the top end. First we're going to oil prime it and put all the hydraulic lifters in. Then we'll go ahead and bolt the cylinder heads on, the push rods, rocker arms, and intake manifold. Well, now we've got the engine sitting right side up. And the next process we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pour our motor oil in. And usually on a rebuilt engine for your first fire up, I like to use kind of a thin oil. So I would recommend 1030 or 1040 oil. And we're just going to pour it in. Make sure you get it in all the little lifter bores. This also helps to pre-lube everything too. Also on this engine I can actually pour it right on the camshaft, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now we've already got the oil filter installed and we've got the drain plug installed, and what we're going to do next is we're going to put our oil primer tool in here and pump this system right through with fluid and kind of flush it out before we put the lifters in. Just in case there is any debris in there, it'll flush it out, it'll go back in the oil pan and through the oil filter again a second time around, instead of scratching up our lifters and anything else that comes in its path. So what I've got here is an old gutted out point style distributor. You can use any old distributor, but you have to take the gears off the bottom. That way it won't engage into the camshaft. And what all you do is slide it down in the oil pump shaft hole, spin the shaft and make sure it engages, which it already has, and I'm going to go ahead and put some vice grips right on the top here to turn it. Alright, now that we've put the oil in and we have the distributor in place, you need to go and find wherever your oil pressure gauge hooks up, or your pressure tuning unit, which actually is right near the oil filter on this particular engine. And I'm just going to screw on a Chevy sending unit electric switch to plug the hole up. That way when we pump this oil pressure up, otherwise oil would squirt right out. And that should be the only oil pressure outlet on the engine. So we're going to go ahead and put our vice grip right on the top of the distributor shaft and just crank it by hand. Some people think you need to put a drill or some kind of motor on here, but that's not really necessary. You can just pump it by hand. I'm going to wait till I see oil coming out of these little oil passages in the lifter bores. And that'll start coming out of the back ones first. That's nearest to the oil pump, and I can see oil coming out right now. In fact, I can hear air bubbles coming out everywhere too. Just go ahead and pump that. It might take a little while to fill up the oil filter and everything. So I'm getting sufficient oil pressure now. I can feel a lot of pressure on my finger pumping it. And there is a lot of air coming out. And then again, we're also flushing out any little dust particles or dirt particles that was left in there from the machine shop. And that's going right back into the sump rather than through the whole system. And it'll be caught up in the oil filter. And also we're going to change the oil after we run this thing for about an hour. We'll do all our valve adjustments and get all the bugs out of it, and then after that I recommend always changing the oil in the oil filter after you run your new engine for about an hour. That'll give it a good flush out. You'll put your new oil and filter in and it'll stay clean that way. Okay, now we've gone ahead and make sure the oil pump works, working fine. I'm going to go ahead and start installing the lifters. Another good thing about this procedure is normally you would soak these lifters in oil overnight or something to make sure they get filled. And what we're going to do is we're just going to actually pump oil pressure right through them. So what I do is I'll put two in at a time. Remember, these are already lubed. These holes already have oil in them, so I don't have to worry about soaking these things. I'm going to put 2 back ones in, pump this a little. It'll flush out the next hole. And as you can see, a little oil is already coming out of these lifters. Put 2 more in. And so on, all the way down the line. And you'll flush out every little passage in here until you get to the front. Well, now I've given you a little bit better view, and what we're going to do is continue installing our lifters and pumping the air out of the system. If you watch right in your little lifter oil hole, you'll see these things fill up full of oil and pump out, and what we're doing is priming our lifters, which is going to prevent them getting damaged on that first fire up. Once they have some oil in them, they're going to have some hydraulic pressure inside, and that's going to protect the little spring inside from breaking. Continue going down the line here. And these lifters should slide in very easy, and you shouldn't have to force them. If any of them feel like they're sticking or hard to go in, you need to maybe take the block down to the machine shop and have them clean that little lifter bore out. Sometimes they do create a little burr or odd shape. These things really have to run smoothly up and down, and also they're going to spin and rotate while the engine's running, which prevents wear and tear on your camshaft. So that's a real important thing to take notice of, is just make sure these lifters slip right into the hole easy. They need to move up and down with no interference. So here's our final 2 lifters. Pump this thing up again. Just watch all your little lifters and you'll see the oil coming out. As you can tell, we're getting great oil pressure coming out of here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get my wrench to crank on this crankshaft. And I'm going to rotate the crankshaft and fill that crankshaft full of oil pressure also. Don't really need to crank it a lot of rotations around, but just keep steady pressure on your oil pump. Crank that crankshaft around, and you'll feel the release of oil pressure as it spins around and lines up those oil pressure holes. We're also lubricating the cam bearings while we're doing this too. There's a pretty good view of the oil coming out of your lifters.